Please welcome Professor Dr. Stanislav Semerdjiev.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elena, for this wonderful presentation. I always feel very shy when anyone talks about me. Should I sit or should I stay? I stay. Yeah, out of respect, yes. I must say first that I am really happy to be here. I just said to Bettina, where is Bettina? I just said to Bettina that coming to Munich for me has always been as if I'm returning home. And for some of you who know me, you know why I'm saying this. But the others who don't know me, I will just summarize it in 3 sentences. The Munich Student Film Festival was the very first event in my life as a student, when I was in my 2nd year as a student. And this was very long ago, in 1984. And this was also my very first trip outside socialist, communist Bulgaria. So you can imagine the shock which I had when I came to Munich, a beautiful city, with completely different feelings and behavior of the people, etc., etc. And finally, I have been to the Munich Film Festival for so many times in different capacity, as a student, as a jury member, as a workshop leader in those years, that I really feel at home here. And I want to warmly congratulate the festival for this 40th anniversary. It is actually, historically, the 2nd festival organized by a film school since film schools exist. There was one more festival before that. It was in Karlovy Vary. Maybe some of you know about this festival. And Munich was actually the 2nd festival. It attracted students from all the CILECT schools. At this time, CILECT was not as huge as it is now. We have 180 members right now. And at that time, we only had 42 members. But it was the place where people started to understand we live in a global community. It was the place where students started to find out friends outside their schools and outside their countries, and started to make projects together and started to understand that the world is one community. Therefore, I believe that the importance of the Munich Film Festival is huge in the development of film education as a whole. It is also, of course, very important for the development of international relations and of personal, individual choices in life and development of careers of students who now, most of them are big names in the film industry. And of course, some of them are teachers like me. So I'm not going to lose any more time because I don't want to be boring. But when I start speaking at the Munich Film Festival, I cannot stop being emotional, and I cannot stop being full of love and full of gratefulness, because I think that for everybody who has been here at least once, it is a memorable event. It is an event which stays with him or her until that person starts to do things that have importance, and then he understands that this festival has been important in that person's life. So I really want to congratulate on behalf of CILECT, the World Association of Film and Television Schools, the Munich Student Film Festival at its 40th anniversary. I want to congratulate the Munich Film School, which created that festival. And I want to congratulate the people that are running this festival right now, because they are giving their best. I can see that in those really hard times, the festival works perfectly fine, and people are happy, and people are watching wonderful films and taking whatever they can out of their communication around with each other. So I don't really want to wish another 40 years or another 140 years or whatever. We don't know what will happen with our world tomorrow, but I want to wish that this festival continues for as long as it is possible and for as long as it is needed, to give people hope, to give students a belief in their own future and in the future of the audiovisual world. And finally, to give us all the feeling of happiness and joy, which we always have. Thank you all, and sorry for being so long.
Thank you so much. Dear Stan, thank you very, very much for your congratulations speech. And very happy to introduce the host of today's panel. It is Professor Egbert van Wyngaarden, a professor for screenwriting, creative writing of Macromedia University, which is also part of CILECT. He's the head of first movie program at the Bavarian Film Center and the founder of StoryX Studio for Narrative Futures Design. And actually, his book, Storytelling Futures, just got published. Congratulations for that. And please welcome Professor Egbert van Wyngaarden.
Emotional words about coming to Munich as a young filmmaker and defending the festival. And thank you, the team of HFF Munich, especially Professor Bettina Reitz and the festival team for hosting us here this afternoon and giving me the opportunity to speak about my new book. I've given this keynote the title, Awaken the Future Within, You Will See Why. Before we start, I would like to ask a question to you in the audience. If you think of the future, like 2050, 60, away on, if you think about the future, who of you feels rather optimistic and who of you feels rather apocalyptic? Let us see who feels a little bit apocalyptic about the future. Who dares to feel apocalyptic? Some hands, maybe 1/3, or yeah. Who feels optimistic? Wildly optimistic. Okay. I think it's on a par, actually. It's sort of 50-50 between apocalyptic and optimistic. And let us see whether the keynote and the panel this afternoon can change your assessment, change your opinion of what the future could be. If I think about the future, I feel a lot of anger and also sadness, but mostly anger, because everybody knows about the challenges that are looming ahead. And yet you all know we do so little. Science is very clear about the future of the planet if we don't watch out. And if I look around in Munich, in the streets, for most people around me, global warming doesn't seem to be a real issue at all. And sometimes I have the feeling that people are sleepwalking. And this has pushed me to thinking very deeply about the role of media and storytelling in bringing futures in the plural of possibilities about. So I'd like to present today some thoughts about why and how media could and maybe should assume a role of creative leadership when it comes to shaping the world of tomorrow. I find it very exciting to be alive in the early 21st century, but I also see it's a very challenging moment in the history of the planet. We call this era the Anthropocene, a geological epoch where mankind determines what happens on Earth. Natural phenomena, for example, the effects of climate change, have become cultural phenomena, depending on our decisions, behavior, attitudes, in the end, very deeply on our level of perception and awareness. Our grandparents lived in a world where their environment used to shape them, and now it is us who shape the environment for better or worse. Of course, I know humans are extremely inventive. We've created art, language, technology, science, atomic bombs, cars, Facebook. But are we capable of dealing with the consequences of our inventions? Are we ready to take responsibility for our actions? I'm not so sure about that. And, of course, we know there are serious challenges to deal with. First, but not only, global warming. COP26 just ended, don't mention it to me. But I think that the awareness of climate change is there. We're past the denial phase. We're entering a time that some people call a time of consequences, where we have to cope with the decisions the past 7 to 8 generations before us made. And how do we want to deal with that? I think it's clear that we are going to have to change a lot of things, but it doesn't really seem that people are willing to give up their comfort, their privileges. Humans dislike limits and curbs to their freedoms. Or as a recent survey among citizens in 10 leading economies puts it, the widespread awareness of the importance of the climate crisis has yet to be coupled with a proportionate willingness to act. So the real question is, do we really care? Or maybe, is it too hard for people to think about these things? Global warming and related issues like the loss of ecosystems, species extinction, are not our only challenges in the 21st century. Other existential risks that concern our future include nuclear threats, uncontrolled artificial intelligence, bioweapons, maybe new pandemics. And these things, although they are known, are not so strongly on everybody's radar, but they may be the more imminent threats than climate change. And where are the global conferences trying to regulate and contain the risks involved here? And of course, there's also the category of natural disasters. Think of a supervolcano eruption, a meteorite falling from the sky. These things are super cinematic, but much less likely to happen, which is why I don't consider them so strongly. Our real concern, I believe, is the trouble we've created ourselves. All these threats taken together could make us feel that we're nearing a precipice at a rather high speed. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's safe to say that in the decades to come, we're going to deal with unprecedented change. Changes that will be so sweeping, probably, that it might be wise to start approaching everything we do from that perspective. And I really like this quote by the architect, designer, and futures thinker, Indy Johar, to whom we will return at the end of this keynote. Media will play a key role in helping citizens to cope with radical transformation. Media can reach people across countries and cultures fast and at scale, and especially the aspect at scale, I think, is very interesting. Which raises the questions, how futurist literate are we as media makers? Where do we learn what thinking about the future is? Where do we learn how to do this? How do we know what to base ourselves on when thinking about tomorrow's world? Futures literacy, which is the term I use, is not about making predictions. It's about sensing and showing and critically investigating what are possible, probable, preferable scenarios for tomorrow. And I believe that becoming futures literate can help us question our own thinking, our assumptions and biases. An example, if you search on Google, future world, especially here, you get a lot of images like these. They're very technological futures. They're dark. They're austere. You don't see nature. You don't see individual humans. You don't see community. No kids, no butterflies, no playfulness, no fun. And I always thought that the Earth was this rare place in the universe teeming with life, a wonderwork which we should cherish and honor. But that's obviously not what Google likes us to think. And this makes me wonder, whose dream is this? Who is creating and disseminating these gloomy images? What's the vision of justice, power, freedom, nature behind the pictures we see here? Is that the kind of future we want to live in? Why are there no different versions on Google of the future, celebrating life with flourishing humans and animals and landscapes? And what Google's images show is that there is very probably a problem of the imagination, a problem to imagine positive futures. We seem to be locked in a technological, I would call it nightmare, from which there seems to be no escape. And I believe this is quite dangerous, because if people believe they have no future, nothing worth striving for, what incentive then do they have to create a livable world for themselves and their children? So how can we as filmmakers, how can we help our audiences deal with questions of the future? And if we think we can, should we? Don't get me wrong, this is not about being didactic, but I do believe that film and television can make people think about important issues, can make people less afraid, can show what's possible, what each of us can do. And in a time of consequences, where our collective survival may be at stake, working from the future could become a sort of civic, ethical duty. And I believe that is something we as filmmakers, media makers, should be very conscious about. At COP26, pay TV broadcaster Sky presented a study called The Power of TV Nudging Viewers to Decarbonize Their Lifestyles. It's a study by the UK government's social engineering department called the Behaviour Insights team. The main recommendation of this report is that we should gently push audiences towards greener behaviors by showing certain things in TV programs and films. For example, to eat less meat, to fly less often, to buy an electric car, to switch to green banking. Watch less pay TV was not on the list. And of course it makes sense to normalize green behaviors in audiovisual storytelling, so people will be inclined to follow them. This has been done on topics like gender equality, the acceptance of minorities. Think of the emancipatory role of soap operas. We know this works. But the notion of nudging, the use of indirect suggestions to influence people's behavior and decision-making, feels a little bit creepy to me. The report continues and says, broadcasters and content creators should avoid creating TV content that is fear-mongering, blaming, and preaching to TV audiences. This type of content, the report says, was proven to be counterproductive. According to the Behavioral Insights team, it can reduce consumers' willingness to make changes in their lifestyles. So to resume this in my words, in my Dutch words, let's not tell the poor buggers how bad it's really going to be. They might become scared. I am far from convinced that this is the best way to solve our problems. That the best way to solve our problems is to treat adult citizens as little children who need to be seduced into eating vegetables rather than chocolate. Another weak spot of the report is that it ignores the fact that journalism and also feature films need to call to account the real drivers of global warming and the other challenges we're facing. So with all due respect to Sky, besides the uncanny art of nudging, what skills do we really need to help our audiences cope with the things to come? I would like to start with a suggestion from the religious scholar Walter Bruggemann, who calls us to 3 urgent prophetic tasks that authors, I would extend it to journalists, filmmakers, game designers, XR creators, should accomplish. 3 prophetic tasks. The first is to describe reality with brutal honesty from a fact-based approach, treating people like responsible adults. The second is to voice grief in the face of loss and denial, to examine the impact that climate breakdown has on us psychologically. It's a much neglected aspect of life in the Anthropocene, I think even a sort of social taboo. And the third is to articulate buoyant hope as a counter to despair, and to evoke desirable and achievable futures, to give audiences a sense of orientation, confidence, and power over the situation. These 3 prophetic tasks can guide the research, the selection and framing of the subjects we present in our media work. And to do this, what do we need to learn, apart from making great work, of course? I'd recommend to acquire several new skills. These are skills that we've explored in a series of media and futures workshops at the Bavarian Film Center, who helped me publish the book I'm presenting to you in a minute. I think we should start by honestly describing reality, which means telling people that we live in what some call a VUCA world, a world increasingly determined by volatility. Volatility means the nature and dynamics of change. You know what's going on, but there's very little you can do to control the situation. Volatility requires extreme adaptability. The U in VUCA means uncertainty, the lack of predictability with many prospects for surprise. So you lack information and cannot really plan. C stands for complexity, which refers to the multiple, often interrelated forces that determine change. And here we think of systems dynamics, the interrelatedness of systems, exponential developments, tipping points. It makes it very hard to see what decisions we take will actually lead to. And the A in VUCA means ambiguity, a situation in which causal relationships are completely unclear, where no precedents exist, where we're facing unknown unknowns. We're in uncharted territory. So how do we find orientation? Which principles or values can guide us in such a situation? You may have noted that VUCA doesn't fit well into the 20th century Western screenwriting paradigms. Coincidence, jumping conflicts, inconsistent behaviors. It's not really the sort of stuff that helps you sell your screenplay, but it is the sort of stuff that increasingly determines what's happening in the world. So how can we update our storytelling models to better include VUCA? And there's some further fields of knowledge to learn and teach about. And my experience in the workshops we made at the Bavarian Film Center is that a lot of authors, although every story deals with change, presents a transformation in characters or in situations, that a lot of authors don't really systematically think about what that actually is and how change comes about. So I would suggest to start with systems and complexity thinking. Problems like global warming and the others mentioned before are systemic. Understanding them and solving them requires a very different way of thinking than when dealing with conventional linear problems. Which means that the classical hero's journey paradigm, to summarize it very briefly, one hero, one problem, one villain, doesn't apply. We have to learn to understand what systems are and how they function and how they can change. Which leads us to the field of transformation design. To understand who are the actors of change, what are the success factors of transformation in society? Who might be protagonists we have overlooked in stories, but who play an important role in future transformations? What are qualities for problem solving that we give too little attention to in our stories? One thing I find very interesting is that systemic change often happens through negotiation, through cooperation, rather than conflict, not to say violent conflict. It can exist, but a much more, very often it's negotiation and cooperation. Collective storytelling, I think, is a very important point. We will be maybe 10 billion people on Earth in 2050. What does that mean for problem solving, if not that it's going to be a collective process? Shouldn't we update the hero's journey as a storytelling model for collective endeavors? More diverse, more inclusive, more cooperational than confrontational. Futures research is a very interesting field as well. To learn to think about the futures in a fact-based manner with method, critical thinking, to learn to juggle with multiple scenarios at the same time. And if we combine this type of thinking with visionary imagination, that could offer genuine relevance to audiences. And the last aspect I would like to mention is positive psychology. To not disempower people by making them feel hopeless or powerless, but to counter anxiety and despair by showing what ordinary people can do, what we can gain by changing our lifestyles, our values, how we can find purpose and meaning in caring about this very special place we live in. Futures literacy is an approach to futures thinking developed by UNESCO. And I would like to emphasize that it's not about being ideological. It's not about pushing a political agenda, but it is about being moral. It's about asking questions of responsibility for who we are and what we do. And I really like the term moral imagination that was proposed first by Edmund Burke and then continued by Gunther Anders and Joanna Macy in the 20th century. And I would like to interpret moral imagination as the effort to include in our considerations about the future and in our decision-making today the perspectives and interests of those who come after us, of other forms of life as well. And I think it's also an invitation to decolonize our thinking, to not blindly extrapolate attitudes and power structures into the future. So if I could express a wish to this audience and also to other film students, no more dystopias, or no more stupid dystopias, please. No more stories about the last people on Earth, which we get to see quite frequently. I don't care how apocalyptic you feel, although I deeply sympathize with your despair. But I'm not sure that projects like Messengers to a Post-Human Earth, presented at ITFA starting today, are really relevant to our present moment, whatever their artistic merit may be. I don't want to put into question that. But I do believe that doom and gloom won't help us forward, because they're disempowering. Rather, to return to Indy Johar, ask, from what standpoint should we approach media making in the Anthropocene, if not from the perspective of how we'd like tomorrow's world to be? As some would say, how we'd like tomorrow's world to be at the highest of our human capabilities. And I believe that the visual and narrative power of cinema and television are needed more than ever. And this doesn't at all mean that every story now has to become science fiction, far from that. I'd suggest to put ordinary people, other living beings maybe, or the planet entirely center stage. We can still make historical movies. We can still show small gestures of care and concern in films, especially if they can highlight qualities that we need to handle the 21st century's challenges. I would like us to lead the way as thinkers, storytellers, visual designers, to create pictures of tomorrow that are more truly human and more aspirational than what Google has to offer us. The Anthropocene means we're going to redesign the world, which is a formidable chance, a formidable invitation to awaken the future within, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. My desire for media professionals to assume a role of creative leadership has pushed me to writing the book Storytelling Futures. And if you wish, it's a crash course in futures literacy, where we put system thinking, transformation design, futures research into the service of making media for the era we're living in. And as you can see, it's an interdisciplinary approach, which you could summarize in two words: rigor and play. To practice foresight rigorously, based on facts and with method. Play to strengthen our imagination, to work with and from the future. To adapt storytelling paradigms for a 21st century predicament. To develop more inclusive projects with heightened relevance for audiences. And also to deeply think about how we can use film and television as drivers for change. There's a free online version of the book, which you can find here through the link. I also have cards with me where you can find the link as well, if you wish. And the book will go on sale, I hope, next week. We have some trouble getting it into the Amazon store and to the German bookshops. And just to finish, we're planning one last workshop for young film talents at the Bavarian Film Center at the end of January, called Transformational Media. And if you kindly ask, I think we might consider doing it in English. Thank you very much. I would like to invite our panel guests on stage. Just come up, and then we'll do a short introductory round with all of you and discuss some questions. Always also open the round to the audience in a few minutes. Ah. Oh.
No, but please.
No, Mayan, please. Please, please. I didn't know there were.
I go in the middle, I don't care.
Then I will go here. So you can. Julia, Marion, please. And I can lead from here. It's good. Up there. Oh my. Okay. No. I don't want to be up there because it's sort of. I would feel like I don't know, some kind of Oberkommandant looking on the panel. I would like to start this round in a bit an unconventional way, in a very Dutch way, if you wish. And I actually like this because it shows that working towards the future is also a matter of improvisation. I would like to start this panel in a little bit unconventional way, a very Dutch way, with what we call a vulnerable opening. And before I will introduce you one by one, I would like to ask you a question, namely, if you think about the future, as you read about it in the news, or if you talk about it with your friends and in your family, what do you feel? What are emotions that are connected with thinking about the future for you? And I would like to start with you, Julia, if that's okay.
I just read that Yuval Harari, when he was asked in what time, on what place on Earth, and what time of all possible times would you like to live? And he answered that it would be Germany nowadays. That's the safest and healthiest and most democratic place in every time of the world and in the world. And I was very thankful when I heard that I can live here and that, my children can grow up here. And I also thought when I read that probably it will be even better in the future. And I can see that when I see my students, which are very responsible people, and they think so much about the future and about politics and moral questions. And when I see my children, which are teenagers, I admire them deeply, and they are much smarter than I was at their age. So I'm very optimistic and thankful.
Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know her yet, Professor Dr. Julia von Heinz, originally from Berlin. Early on, she wrote, produced and directed award-winning short films, and her debut feature, Was am Ende zählt, What Counts in the End, was awarded the German Film Prize in Gold as Best Children's and Youth Feature. And this was just the beginning of a thrilling series of successful film projects and collaborations amongst others with Tom Tykwer and Michael Winterbottom, and many, many more interesting filmmakers. And Julia von Heinz teaches fiction film directing at HFF Munich here. Marion, let's come to you. Your emotions when thinking about the future.
Yes, I think I'm not that optimistic because we are facing a lot of threats. You just showed them to us. But I also think that we are survivors. So in the end, we will make it. But there is a lot of things has to happen before that.
Okay, thank you very much. I sense some Dutch Bodenständigkeit, how do you say in English? Realism, that things will come and we'll have to deal and cope with them. Marion Slewe is the senior producer of the Netherlands Film Academy, located in Amsterdam. She's worked there in several positions for over 30 years, supporting film students in handling the financing, accounting, production and distribution of their projects, and apart from her work at the Netherlands National Film Academy, Marion herself is also a producer at Staccato Films. Then we come to Isabelle. Your ideas, feelings, emotions about the future.
I think it's terrible. I think Earth is gonna make it, but we won't. And about the students, in my school it's a small school. There are about 100, and in France you have about 10% of écologique, green party. And so I think among my students there are 10% being aware of what's going on, and 90% are not.
Okay, thank you. Isabelle Heurtel.
Heurtel, yes, I know
Heurtel.
it's difficult.
I'm sorry. Heurtel. Isabelle Heurtel is founder and director of ESCAT in Tours, France. She's worked as a journalist and as a presenter with leading French TV networks, M6, TF1, TF1, France 3, and she's collaborated with renowned journalists like Stéphane Bern and Valérie Expert. Isabelle Heurtel has also produced and directed documentary films with the agency Kappa and the Endemol Group. Stan, can we ask you for your emotional assessment of the future?
As I already said in the beginning, I'm an emotional person, so my emotional assessment will probably sound very emotional. I am a true believer that the Earth will live very long, and that we will live on this earth, not we personally, but humanity will live on this earth very long. But what I want to see in the future, what I imagine from the future, is that we will not be alone in this universe. I truly believe that this is the most important goal of humanity. We have to find the other humanities or whatever species are there. I believe that we are already at the stage of development when we have to put all our efforts into understanding cosmos. And of course, I agree with everything that you said about climate change and other things that are important on Earth. But I think we should look at the stars and try to build our future, imagining a world with all these other civilizations.
Okay, thank you. As you've been introduced before, I think we can come to Michael straight away. Thank you. Michael, yes, your emotions, thoughts about the future, really personal assessment.
Yeah, well, it changes a bit moment to moment, and after listening to Stan, I feel slightly more hopeful about the future. But I would say generally anxiety, which I think is a good way to feel pretty much at any moment in human history, is anxiety. And I think if you have children, you feel a special anxiety thinking about the world your children are going to be going into. And I think that it's very difficult to predict what's coming. I think that, Julia, the quote that you said, maybe somebody might have said that in 1920 is in Germany also. So there's real political turmoil on top of all the climate turmoil that you talked about, Egbert. So I think my honest emotion is tinged with some hopefulness is anxiety.
Okay, thank you. For those of you who don't know him yet, Professor Michael Comfort has worked as a journalist and a film critic, and also as a writer, director, and producer of documentaries and feature films. He's written the libretto of Nix, a blues-inflected opera. I love this formulation. A blues-inflected opera that premiered at Munich Biennale. And he's just finished his first VR film, Fragments of Jerusalem, which premiered at the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto and is now touring the world. For most of the past decade, Michael has been director of the film program at Ryerson University, where he's also an associate producer. Thank you all for being here and discussing questions related to the future of film education. I would like to start with a question that is close to the keynote, close to future thinking, and then we can evolve towards more producing-oriented or curriculum-oriented questions concerning the future of film education. I would like to ask you, Julia already said a little bit about how the students think about the future, and actually you feel quite hopeful. I would like to see if in your schools, if you can sense in students there is a concern about the future. Are people consciously working with it, or is it something that doesn't play so much of a role? How do you sense the young generations you have in your schools? And maybe we can start in Toronto and then move a little bit back.
Sure. It's not only about the future in Toronto, it's also about the present. So the school that I teach in, which is Ryerson University, is going through a ton of political turmoil right now because the founder of Ryerson University, who it's named after, Egbert van Wyngaarden, was also the founder of residential schools for First Nations children. And this was a tremendously emotional period of history. And there's been a big movement among faculty and students to change the name of the university. And that's actually happening. Well, I guess it's in the future because it'll happen in the next 6 months. So I think that in Toronto, which is a very diverse city, a very politically active city, there's a real engagement by the students with all these issues, with environmental issues, with issues of social justice. I think in some ways they are ahead of the faculty in this. I think that the next generation of filmmakers is inherently aware of the way these issues are going to be affecting their world.
Thank you. How do you sense that in Bulgaria, Stan, with your students?
I'm a person that doesn't like to make general statements. Therefore, I wouldn't say that my students are very much interested in the future or in the past or in the present. There are students that are interested in different things. And I believe that this is normal. And I would rather encourage them to stay like this. I don't think that I should interfere with their own way of understanding life and with their own way of making their mistakes and learning from their mistakes. I believe this is most important in a teaching process, that you don't really teach some kind of morality. You were talking about morality here, or some kind of predestined ideas about things in life. And therefore, I still think that we are paying too much attention to elements in our life that are transitional elements. For example, the coronavirus. This is something that came, but it will go away. And I'm very unhappy that 99% of the talks that I participate in are focused on the coronavirus. And what do we do now? How do we deal with this now? This will go away. And maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 3 years, maybe, I don't know. But as each war, as each pandemic in the world, it comes and goes. So I think we should concentrate on things that are vital for humanity.
And as you mentioned, a plurality of approaches and perspectives and interests in young filmmakers, because that's the way it is. People are very different and deal with their lives and their society in a different manner. Isabel, I would like to ask you one thing. You already mentioned something about your students. There is a very interesting movement in France which looks into the future and says we have to reconnect with, in French, it sounds really nice. In English, it's a little bit hard. In German, it's very hard to translate. In French, I would say to reconnect with le vivant, that which is alive, which I really like in French as a formulation.
Okay, so this is nice to hear, but it's, as I told you, 10% of the people. And so I'm sorry to make it cold like this. But, okay, talking about my students, they don't care. They really don't care. And so as I do care, I try to bring them in a kind of a path in indirect ways. For example, I won't tell them, please talk about ecology, do a theme about this. But as you say, I try to because as you showed earlier, their words is a science fiction word, dystopias, as you said. The first years of the school, because I created the school 5 years ago, and all the scripts we had were dystopias, okay? And after a while, they come to something more intimate with feelings. And as you know that in France we are the specialist of auteur cinema. Auteur cinema means two guys on a couch and they talk. And so, well, this is, they talk and they make love, okay. So this is the kind of thing we can do, and we know to do, how to do. And this is not that silly. So I tell them, okay, go to the feelings, go to your intimacy, and you'll find something important in this. And so it's not a way of talking about the universe, and it's a way of talking about you. And if you go to your own feelings, you will find the feelings to your neighborhoods, and after that you will come to the humanity. So that's the way I try to lead them towards something which is the living thing. Because if you want if you are listening to your feelings and you are listening to the feelings of your people around you, you will hear the feelings about the trees, and you will hear the feelings about nature, and maybe one day you will be aware of what's going on. And so little by little I try to show that to them. It's a long way.
Marion, I'm Dutch myself, so I think I know a little bit about what's happening in the Netherlands, and I find it very impressive in the media, especially WPRO Tegenlicht. Is a very, very good documentary program about questions of the present, but also questions of the future, where you can really get glimpses of new thinkers and new approaches that you won't find so easily anywhere else, maybe in Britain, but I think Holland is very far. Then there's Wouter van Noort at NRC, who has a newsletter and a podcast and does conferences. And I think there's a lot of very advanced thinking about future, whatever it's going to be. Do you find something like that reflected in the work of students at the film school, or is it more or less similar to what we've heard before?
Yeah, I think it's more or less similar, but our students are very much involved in matters of diversity at the moment, and that's what that's a topic that's very high on the agenda of our director for many years now. So we see that now in the films they're making, but also Black Lives Matter was very important, and we got a lot of discussions in the school also about safety, about if you could speak up for yourself. So I think that the main focus is on that actually, and not so much on future or climate or that sort of things. And I think most films are still very personal films, so especially the documentaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I would like to move to the next question. Maybe we can start with you, Julia, and then open the round in a more dynamic way. I would like to learn a little bit about your thoughts, how we maybe should involve the way we tell stories, systemic storytelling, things like that. What would be your thoughts on that? Should we change also something in the way we teach screenwriting and fictional storytelling?
I asked myself a lot the question in the last time how we as film schools can stay attractive for young people to apply at our film schools. We have about 200 appliers for fiction directing, and that is about half from what they had 20 years ago. And when I see all these artists on TikTok and Twitch and Instagram, I see many, many very young, talented people rather go there than they come to us and apply to be filmmakers. And I'm thinking about how we can gain them back. And I can see that film, we had the whole Me Too thing. So a lot of women probably think it's not very safe to work in film. We have all this very bad payment and very bad working condition reports about our industry. So how can we stay attractive for all these great young artists as a school? So I'm asking myself that. And also we talked about it when we said here, how can we have film schools where the interaction with other countries can be much more easy? Because my daughter, she wants to be 1 year here and 1 year there, and we just talked about it. It's not even possible if you study film in Munich. It's most in German. It's very difficult to go somewhere else for 1 year, so that's also not very attractive for young people who are much more thinking global. Elena, you know it. It's very hard for us to find places for our students to go abroad for 1 year. So I'm asking myself a lot of these questions at the moment.
Thank you. So attractivity of a curriculum for students who may be venturing out on social media platforms, and they say, why study 4 years when I can have a success tomorrow? The general reputation of the film industry in the last years, the problem of internationalization. I would like to come back to internationalization at the end of the panel and stay a little bit still with dramaturgy and screenwriting, and maybe jump to Stan from the perspective of teaching screenwriting. Do you have the impression that there's things we should evolve or include in screenwriting programs that we may not have emphasized so much before?
Yes, I want to repeat something that I said exactly 30 years ago in Munich, not in this hall, but at the CILECT Congress. At that time, I was a young teacher, and there was this opportunity to present proposals for projects, scientific projects or pedagogical projects that could be developed between the schools. And I was utopic enough to present a project that was called Psychological Effects of Media Teaching. Nobody voted for my project. And I talked to other people from other schools and I said, are you not interested in how what we do through films or television affects people? They said, oh, but this is very old, we all know about it, etc. I think we don't know anything about it. In some schools, we teach psychology of perception, of visual perception, which has nothing to do with mental perception. I have heard about schools that do a little bit of psychology of perception of different communication issues. But basically, when a person says something on screen, the way that person says this thing, how does this affect the audience? In what different circumstances it affects it differently, etc., etc. How does color affect the audience from the screen, not from the painting? And how does the change of colors and the change of movement? These are things that nobody really teaches. We talk about this, but we talk in a very amateurish way. And I think that in the next few years, especially when virtual reality becomes not just an exotic thing, but it will be a very, very important part of our education, when we have a virtual reality around the audience, and the audience will also be able to smell and not only to hear and see, but to probably even believe that you can touch, etc. This will change completely the way we perceive the audiovisual medium. And we are not prepared for this. We don't know how will people be affected by this.
Thank you. Psychology of perception as a domain, very interesting. I saw you nodding, Michael. Maybe because you also make VR, it could be nice to hear your reaction to that.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's, of course, an important consideration is how different technologies, how different forms of presenting stories affect the kinds of stories. It's as simple even now as the rise of streamers. And so the way you frame a story arc now is often very different. If you're making a series, well, you better think about cliffhangers rather than act 1, 2, 3 and an epilogue. You have to think different already and that's simply a matter of the way the story comes to the audience. Obviously, techniques like VR, and I thought a lot about it as I just did one, and I saw a lot of VR work that I thought didn't work at all because it didn't use the language of the form, which is surrounding you which is looking in every direction. It didn't use the space. It didn't use the psychology. It didn't utilize that. So it really takes thought with each new form. I do want to jump back to one thought about the complexity of reality, which is a phrase you mentioned, and I also I feel it's sometimes dangerous to put a system onto reality. And so I think that reality is, the present is complex enough. I was worried about the future of film education. I was worried, well, what about the present of film education? That's already complex. And so I do think that if we're, as artists, as filmmakers, if we're able to capture the complexity of human life already and the problems that we face as human beings already, well, my God, that's a fantastic achievement and difficult enough. So I think you have to start from there as you begin to think where we're going.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to pick up this suggestion starting from today and then moving on a little bit into the future, but in a very pragmatic way. I don't want to talk about the pandemic, but I would like to see how the things we've had to improvise in the way we teach, online, remote, presence in different constellations, hybrid forms of teaching with students who are at the school and other students who are remote online, how you think technology, digitization can actually improve or boost film training, or maybe not at all. I'm curious to see. And let's just open the round to see who would like to respond to that. Should we become much more digital, do more online, or?
If I may. During the lockdown, we lost 30% of our students. They were in their rooms and they were fed up with the computers. Did you want to attend the classes we did? It was over. So from year 1 to year 2, we have only 2 years, we lost 30 of them. So the conclusion about this is that we have to remain for real. And, cinema, so of course not in America, but in France, we have this savoir-faire, this handmade, artisanal sense of making films. And, when you make films, when you're on a set, I'm sure you've been there already, you always have a box in wood just to put something in. It's not digital. It's you put a little piece of wood just to make it the right way. It will always be artisanal, and that's the magic of cinema, I think. And so I think there are pandemics. Well, we are in big shit, but but if we can keep this relationship with people and this human relationship, and that works a lot. And the pupil in my school, small school, they are so happy to be here, work together, see people, being a team, working on a project. And when we just came back to school, they were so happy about it. And so I think we have to keep this group strength and the present strength and the reality strength.
Okay, thank you. Let's have a look at Amsterdam and Munich. If there's anything you would say, we've done things before differently, we wouldn't want to go back to that. Have things changed in a way that there are also positive aspects of what we've had to do the last 2 years?
No, I agree with Isabel that we should practice for real and meet in person and discuss and communicate, because that is what our students are lacking now, we found out. But I think the only good thing that came out of it was that remote education, especially by foreign people, that worked out great, because we had to switch to digital education, online education. So a lot of classes dropped out because they weren't possible anymore. So all my colleagues were just looking in their network. Okay, do I know a cinematographer who could add something in a masterclass? So they approached international cinematographers, and they were at home as well. So we had great online masterclasses, and that worked out.
So a chance for internationalization, bringing in people who wouldn't take the plane to visit you.
Yeah.
Apart from this.
But also now had the time for it.
Yeah. Julia, how's your experience there?
Very similar. We also had conflicts and misunderstandings that came because of all these Zoom meetings, and we don't need them at all. And we have to, I don't know, we have to fix some things now that we can come together. And it was very rare that that students could use this online thing to make interesting films or something. Actually, it was very difficult, and we are so happy when it's over. But in film history, which is a more theoretical part of our education, the results were even better. Michaela Krützen, our professor, said that very shy students who wouldn't talk in a classroom, they dared to say more, or they had better results. And this was very interesting for me to hear, but not at all in the directing classes.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking in the audience to see if there's questions related to the topics we've been discussing so far. I would like to take up a subject Julia mentioned, that there is a whole new generation of people making media, audiovisual media on new platforms, very different platforms than television and cinema, social media. And to see with you in the different countries and the different schools where you're at, do you feel that the interest is getting slightly less for the more classical forms of audiovisual storytelling and filmmaking? Do you have the impression that it would be necessary to open or maybe create new curricula for people who work in a very different ways, who are on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, have very different attitudes? How would you feel that? Maybe we start with you, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we ask our new students, what do you want to be? Many still dream of being, I don't know, the cinema auteur who wins the Palme d'Or at Cannes. But if you ask them, when did you go to the cinema last time? Now it's pandemic, but also 2 years before. It's like months ago that they saw anything in cinema. So like cinema is finding itself, and what does it mean for society, and will it exist in 10 years? I can see that totally in the dreams, in the very uncertain dreams of my students. Who do I want to be? No one dreams of being the fifth shooter of a series with a showrunner that tells them what to do. But most of them will do that. But no one dreams of that. But they love to watch that stuff. So it's very unclear at the moment what our directors can be. This is what I feel, and I want to find out with them because I don't know myself.
Let me just stay with you, Julia. If you would be 17 years old, and you would sort of consider, let's do something with this funny camera I have in my pocket.
Probably not. Probably I would try on YouTube rather than apply here. I don't know. Probably yes.
Okay, yeah. Any of the others, are you considering curricula for social media filmmakers, let's call them like that? Is there any new?
Sorry, yeah.
Isabel, then Stan.
Yeah, I was thinking that, in France, there was a lack of technicians because of the huge amount of productions. So exactly what you said. You young people don't go to the cinema, but you young people, you watch movies or series on your computers. So that means that there is a lot of productions you are going to work on, but it means that maybe it's another way to watch them. And so we have to include this in our way to think. And it's not the end of cinema, because there will be films, and we can see that there are films. This is this big problem. There's this big problem about Netflix producing films. But as long as there are films on platforms or on cinema or whatever, if they can work on it, it's really good for them. So as I'm very pessimistic about the future of the earth, I'm very optimistic about the future of technicians. And so I'm happy to form all these people, because I think there going to be space for them to work. And it's amazing to think that they have to stop productions because they didn't have technicians. Directors had to wait for technicians. So I just form a lot of technicians to work on these movies, and it's a good thing. And so I'm happy about it.
Thank you. Stan?
Yeah, we introduced courses in virtual reality and transmedia a few years ago, and the students simply divide it in two. Half of them hate those courses, half of them love those courses, which is normal, as I said in the beginning. And so I encourage the ones that love the courses to continue and try to do things in that world. And the others, I tell them that, of course, you don't believe now, but you will not be Oscar winners. You will not be even European Film Award winners. You will be working as a second assistant cameraman or whatever. And they don't believe, but life will teach them. So I don't even spend more time on this anymore. But just one remark on everything that the lady said about the pandemic teaching through Zoom. Exactly what I was talking about. We don't know what is the effect when the same person who you know in person and who you work with in person talks to you through the screen, and what is the effect of this? I have students that I have been teaching for 6 hours before the pandemic in class, and they don't even go to the toilet because they're so interested in what we are doing. In Zoom, the same students that know me very well, I don't even see their faces because they switch off their cameras, and every 5 minutes I tell them, switch on your camera, switch on your camera. So this is an effect which we don't even understand. And this is going to be happening more and more. We will understand that there are very interesting effects of the media which we don't know anything about.
Michael, yes, please.
No, I would just add that part of the complexity of reality, because I've had the exact same experience with some students, and then other students who feel much more comfortable being on Zoom and feeling safer in a certain way. And it's strange. I mean, I don't like it. I don't like the general experience of it. But it does have different effects with different people. We are doing a change. We just started a brand new master's program in script writing, which is across the media. So it includes writing for film, writing for television, writing for theater, writing for new media. And so first year is actually this fall. So we started in a pandemic. It's a little tricky, but the aim is to recognize that writers are going to be working across these media. You know, this is nothing new. Look at David Mamet. Look at all sorts of writers who write for both theater and film and television. But it's an expansion and an acknowledgement that you can't stay in your working career. You most likely will not stay in your working career in just one of those models. And as delivery fuzzes the lines between those models, it becomes ever more so.
Thank you. I would like to ask you one last question. And it refers a little bit to the present moment we have. We've had 2 years where physical interaction was more difficult. It was much more difficult to connect students to players in the industry, to open them bridges or doors towards the film industry. How's your opinion at the moment? Do we have to strengthen efforts to bring students more strongly in contact with industry players they haven't had the chance to meet the last 2 years? And what would you be doing concretely to support that more? Maybe Marian.
Oh, yes. Oh, I think that our students weren't that affected by that because all our graduation films are made in cooperation with television companies. So they work together with dramaturgs and journalists on documentaries. So they have those connections, and they still did their stage.
The internship.
Yes, sorry, their internships, more or less. Sometimes it was difficult, but so they still had that contact. And then last October, we had our graduation film festival at the Film Museum in Amsterdam. And we also organized their day special for our relations, for the professionals. And we had the cinema was filled up with 300 persons. So, and they had afterwards the possibility for drinks and discussions and get to know each other. So I think that is, we're really back to normal, or we were back to normal.
Is that the same for the others too, back to normal? I feel very relieved to hear that, I must say, that actually the impact wasn't that.
We had less outcome in the last years and less films. And I hope we can catch up. We tried to connect them more to the industry, and we invented a Stammtisch where they would meet. But again, in December, we can't do it. So we are still struggling with that. And I feel very, very sorry for the students who left school in the last 2 years. I think it was much more difficult for them than for the students in the years before.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, we were also significantly affected. Canada has been very closed down for almost all of the last 2 years. So we didn't have our end-of-year festival in person. It was online, which is nowhere near the same, as everyone knows. You can't get industry people in. And the work was affected because we had very, very strict regulations about what you could film and how you could film it. And the quality of the work also suffered. I mean, there was some really creative work that was done in this time and used the limitations, but most of it really had some significant effect. And so I agree, for the last couple of years, tough for the students.
Stan?
Yeah, I think there should be extra efforts put into the connection with the industry. Because for some of our students, the 2 years didn't have any bad effect. For example, for screenwriters, they became better because they were staying at home most of the time, writing. It was also good for editors, for animators, etc. But it was a terrible period for all the cinematographers, for all the directors, all the sound people. They cannot practice, they cannot learn. So I am very afraid that for students that are graduating, for example, next year or this year, it will be much more difficult to find jobs. So we have to put extra efforts on the industry. And we have to probably allow those students to get some extra lessons, extra teaching, even if they don't pay for this, because they have been really hit strongly by the crisis. And in my school, we are offering them a 3-month period after graduation to just come and meet with teachers who they feel are important for their learning outcomes, and do a little more practice.
Thank you. Isabel, yes?
Yes, sorry. Yes. May I?
Sure, of course.
Yeah, we were lucky because we are the only school in a huge area in the center of France. And as I told you now, there are a lot of work. And so after school, they are going to internship to this professional team. So we are lucky about that because after school, they can go there.
France is a big country. Bulgaria is a very small
Yeah, that's
country.
right. Yeah, it's because there's a lot of productions that we can send them there, and so we are very lucky about that. And that's how it works. And it's true that even if they are not students anymore, after 1 year they still have the convention, the contract to go to the sets. So it's okay for us too, and it's good for them too. So it was okay. The pandemic was terrible, but after that, as I told you, works is back, and so they can go back to work too.
Dynamic situation. Yes, thank you. I would like to look at the audience and see if there's any questions. We have perspectives from Canada, from Bulgaria, France, the Netherlands, Germany, and some kind of European mix here on the stage. Jan, please.
Yes, my name is Jan Semerdjiev. I'm from DocFest here in Munich. And I have a question. If I look at the reality of my own teaching and compare to how it was, because in former times you had a class and you had a textbook, and that textbook doesn't exist anymore because there's internet. If I now explain my students what is a shot size, like medium, close, or wide, I can tell them, but they can't see a film on the internet with Conrad Hall explaining them. So my idea would be, are there ideas to make use of that? Okay, there's a lot of shit out there, granted, but there are fantastic things out there. And if you would like, challenge you, look at the praise of Blur, which is fantastic. How do you talk with defocus? It's 8 minutes long, it's fantastic. Are there ideas to using that in schools?
My students teach me to find that more than I can tell them where to find it. Yeah, but this happens a lot, yes. The students send me links and it's great. I try to catch it up and to show it to the next class. We should, yes. It's very it's great stuff, yes.
I could suggest a name. YouTube, no. YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah, film essays and masterclasses on YouTube, yeah.
It's full of really good stuff.
It's full of very
My
good stuff.
students are very lazy, so they don't go to see that. So they prefer to hear it from us, and we give them links. No, some of them, I'm just... some of them are going to look for it if they are really interested in, but most of them, they don't go to see, but they should. I send them links. I say, go to see this masterclass by Scorsese. Do you know Scorsese? Kind of.
Stan?
This is a very important question. And I'm really happy that we have to discuss this now. I will try to be short, which is very difficult, answering this question. There are actually two things that I want to mention in relation. One thing is that we have to start rethinking the future of film schools as a whole because of all these things happening on the internet. And Julia was saying that they have double less applicants. We have triple less applicants in the last years. Also because of those internet lessons and things like this. And everybody believes that they can learn through internet. Everybody believes that they are already artists because they're doing something, whatever, with the software they have or with the hardware they have, and they just put it on YouTube or on Vimeo or wherever. And people like it, people dislike it, so they are already filmmakers. They don't need a film school. This is actually hitting most of all the film schools. Not so much the medicine schools. Not so much the architecture schools, not so much even the economy or the schools that teach law, because law is different for each country, etc. But everybody believes they can be a filmmaker or television maker or whatever. And this is killing the film education. And the second thing which I want to say, a few years ago, I was in China. I'm regularly doing workshops in some Chinese universities. And I had the opportunity to meet with a member of the Alibaba group. And you all know Alibaba group. Now they have some problems. But at that time, they were very much into the high stakes. And what I heard from that person, and that was a person in the third level, in the third echelon, as you would say, they were already preparing at that moment complete internet, or I would say digitized lectures and exercises for 273 different disciplines around knowledge as a whole, for something that they were calling the Pan-Chinese School, the Pan-Chinese University, that they want to open as an online university, which didn't happen until now. Their idea was that in 2023 they will open it. obviously, because of the pandemic, this will be slower, but this is going to happen. Maybe there will be a pan-Chinese or pan-European or pan-American or I don't know, pan-Muslim, pan-Christian, pan-Buddhist. I don't know what kind of universities, but they will appear. We have to be prepared for this, Egbert. This is something that we are now talking about, things that are, of course, important to our students at this moment. But in 10 years' time, things will be completely different. And we will be in a situation where all the film schools will probably close in the way they are right now. We will have to learn how to do things online because there will be less and less students coming to us physically. Not because of the pandemic, but because of the internet, because of other different things that happen in this online world. So yes, what you are saying is just in line with what is going to happen. And we have to be prepared and to think how to be prepared for this.
I don't agree.
Isabel.
We have the right to agree and disagree.
No, I think that really human contact and human teaching will always be needed. And I don't think so, because you have all this tuto on YouTube to do, as you say, everything, and so they still come. So I think they will need always some human people, and they have to feel it, and they have to just to be able to ask questions, and the relationship will be needed. I think so. I hope so.
But it will change because
this is what we want to be the situation.
It's also
I'm sorry, but you just said that 30% of your students dropped out
during the pandemic.
Yes,
but they are so happy to come back.
Yes, but you can imagine if this continues for more time, how will this affect the whole situation of people that want to be taught in film and television?
They won't be. They were staying in their room doing nothing, and did you want to be taught anything? So I think if there are pandemics every year, they will stay home, be depressed, and they won't be looking for classes. It will be or human or nothing.
I think it brings up the question of what is film school for, and I think that there are a few different things. One is knowledge that you get, and you can get some of that knowledge absolutely on the internet. You can get, just like you can get all sorts of knowledge from books. Werner Herzog said the most important thing a film student should do is read, which I totally agree with. But there's also the human part of the equation. It's not just the relationship with what the faculty can teach. It's about creating a community and finding people you'll work with. And I think that's a space actually that film school does better than some other places in higher education. I think higher education as a whole is in trouble. I think you're right, Stan. I think that there's going to be huge effects all across higher education. But the one thing film school does have is this creation of a space where you meet someone that maybe you form a relationship with. And I mean, I still work with some people that I worked with in graduate school. Well, I won't say how many years ago, but many years ago. And I think that relationship piece is also part of what film school creates. And you learn from your peers probably at least as much as you learn from faculty members.
I think we should also mention that film schools are very much connected to film festivals, because in my generation, the career of a filmmaker could start at film school, then you come to a festival with your short film, and then hopefully you come to a bigger festival with your first long feature. And also the film festivals, and especially the short film festival, it changed a lot. Much less people go there now. It's not so attractive, and of course they're trying with the pandemic to bring it online, but it's all different. I was the president jury of the FILMSCHOOLFEST last year, and it was great what they did, but of course it was totally not the same, but it will be more and more that, or hybrid forms, so that is totally connected. And it will never go back to where it was, that a film festival is a very important place to be shown to the world with your film, and that you build your career, and that you will build your career much more on YouTube or wherever. I'm very sure about that.
Thank you. I see one question in the audience, please.
It's more maybe a comment, because I just think about it that like I think it's now the moment of discussing for the future what we want to have, because it's going to change now already at the state universities, that like little departments of like film science, Japanese language bachelor studies are cheaper to make them online, and it's now happening in Germany, like everywhere. So I think it's really important to define what we want to tell the students at like a physical university of film. I think, and it's really important, and I think it's also important to define after a pandemic now what is important to be online and what is really important to be offline. But we have to define it, and we don't, like, I have always a feeling we have to talk about it, but we have to do it now, because like the state will one day say we don't have money anymore for it. So how we confront this problem, I just want to think with your sentence, I think it's really, really near to this kind of liberal thinking of economizing and competition, to say, okay, we make it online. Like it's in a capitalist system, it's like the cheapest way. And we have to slow down here and say, okay, we are offline, and we make it like contra-capitalist, we make it contra-fast, and we make something really, really intense here. So please come here. But we have to define it now, I think. Yeah.
It's a very beautiful suggestion, and I really like you saying the moment is now. So the moment to define things is now. And I would like to use your comment as a question for the round. And I wouldn't be Dutch if I wouldn't want to end this panel on a positive note and some optimistic note. Could each of you give a short statement? What you would be really excited about or proud of as an element of future film education? What would be something where you said, if we could achieve this or that, or do something in a particular way, that would be really great if we could get to that point?
That's a difficult one.
Julia, please.
We too, like you, we have all these subjects like gender issues, social justice, and all that. And I feel that comes from the student, and I'm very proud that we have all these intelligent students, and I'm very sure they will make important and intelligent films that can change the world. I'm totally sure about it. And I see that more than in other industries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Micah, are you suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a stab. I think for me, the guts of what is powerful in film education is the work outside of the economy. So contra capitalism, in a sense, that it's the work of really, when you're developing stories, and your attention as a student and as a teacher is really about trying to capture with complexity a human story. And I think this is a very pure work. It's the work of empathy. It's the work of art. It's the work of good film. There's a lot of bad film out there, but it's the work of good film. And for me, that's the thing I enjoy the most and probably the proudest about being part of.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
Okay. For me, the students are from 18 to 20, and I don't know the word in English, accompagne.
Yeah, to
accompagner. I follow them during these 2 years, and it's the way to make films, but for them it's a way to be grown up, and for me this is the most beautiful part of the job. So I don't know if it's an answer to your question, but
I think it will always be an answer to the question. Definitely, yes.
The word of the end for you. She said no.
I'm still thinking about this, and as I said, I'm in an age when I don't really think of strategies and think of what will happen in 10, 20, 30 years. I live day for day because generally I don't know if I wake up tomorrow, which is nothing to do with pessimism and optimism. This is reality. And I'm an optimist, but this is reality. And I just think that what we need to think about is above our everyday understanding of things like diversity or of things like teaching. We have to be open to completely new things that may suddenly happen in life tomorrow. Nobody expected the pandemic. And I don't want to sound crazy. Nobody expects the extraterrestrials to come tomorrow, but they may come. I give this exotic example, which may not be exotic, only to underline that we have to think out of the box. We have to try to understand the different meanings of the words. All of you remember Wittgenstein, who said that all the wars, all the misunderstandings in life happen because people have different understanding of the word. And when we say love, I love you, we mean different things and we understand different things. When we say I care about you, we think about these things differently. When we say teaching, education, diversity, inclusion, whatever, we have to find ways to know what everybody thinks and to try to start from this, to be able to go beyond and to understand that tomorrow the world may be completely different, and we have to be able to understand how we deal with that new world. And I'm not going into utopian, Orwellian, etc. situations. It's just a reality.
No, I don't have to add anything on that.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much for your beautiful, insightful, interesting contributions to the panel. Let's close it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.